The soup hit the floor before she could stop it. Not a spill. A crash. The whole pot ceramic. Heavy. Her mother's recipe inside. Sliding off the edge of the prep counter and shattering across the white tile of the executive dining room like it had been waiting all her life to humiliate her at exactly this moment. Mia CEO didn't move. The kitchen staff froze. The two servers near the window froze. Even the hum of the ventilation system seemed to go quiet, as if the building itself was holding its breath. And then she heard the footsteps. Slow. Certain. The kind of footsteps that don't hurry because they've never had to. She was already on her knees, picking up the largest shard. When the door opened, she didn't look up. She knew, from the silence that followed the footsteps, that whoever had just walked in was not someone she wanted to see her. Like this, hands on the floor, soup cooling around her knees, the broken edge of her mother's old pot in her palm. Leave it. 2 words. Low. Not loud. The kind of voice that doesn't need volume. She looked up. It was tall in a way that felt deliberate. Not just height, but the way he held it, like the space around him had agreed to make room. Dark soup. No. Thai. A face that was almost handsome and almost cold and entirely unreadable, and he was looking at her the way people look at things they don't know what to do with. She had no idea who he was. That was the only reason she said what she said next. I'm not leaving it. It was my mother's. No one in the room breathed. He didn't answer. He looked at the broken pot, then at her hands. Then, and this was the part she would think about later, the part she couldn't explain, at her face. Not her uniform. Not the mess. Her face, like he was checking something. You're the new kitchen staff. Temp. She set the shard down, carefully. Stood. I'll pay for any damage to the floor. You'll pay. He repeated it without expression. Yes. Something shifted in his face. Not softness. Not warmth. Something closer to recalibration. Like she had said, the unexpected thing, and his system needed a moment to process it. Clean it up, he said. And next time, the soup stays on the counter. He left. He didn't look back. Mia stood in the middle of the broken ceramic and the cooling broth and the absolute silence of 10 people trying not to exist. And she thought, I don't know who that was, but I am going to be very careful around him. Bomi appeared at her elbow 4 seconds later, hissing through her teeth. That was Kang Jin-ho. Mia looked at the door he'd walked through. Who is Kang Jin-ho? Bomi made a sound like a person who has been asked to explain gravity to someone who just fell off a roof. He owns this building. He owns the company in this building. He owns 3 more buildings that own companies that own other buildings. He is the reason we have jobs. He is the reason this kitchen exists. He's the reason he told me the soup stays on the counter. And you should listen to him. I was going to listen to him before I knew who he was. Bomi stared at her. That's either very brave or very stupid. Mia picked up the next shard. Probably the second one. But here was the thing she didn't say. The thing she filed away without a name, because naming it would have felt like too much, too fast. He hadn't been cruel. In a room full of people waiting for him to be cruel. Waiting for the firing, the reprimand, the cold executive dismissal. She had braced herself for the moment she heard those footsteps. He had looked at the broken pot and told her to leave it. Not because he was kind. She didn't know that yet. But because something in the way she'd answered him had made him stop. She didn't know what it was. She didn't know that. He didn't know either. 30 years. 30 years of complete emotional containment, of keeping every room at exactly the right temperature, of never letting anyone close enough to matter, and a woman on her knees, on his dining room floor, holding a broken piece of her dead mother's cookware, had looked up at him like he was just a person. Not the CEO. Not the power. Just a person. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his office, 2 floors up, looking at nothing, and did not examine why his chest felt like it had a sound in it he hadn't heard in a very long time. In the security monitoring room on the 4th floor, a different man was watching a different screen. Director Chai Sung-wan had sharp eyes and a patient mouth. The kind of patience that wasn't peace, But calculation. On the screen, Kang Jin-ho, in the doorway of the executive dining room, standing still, looking at the girl on the floor longer than necessary, longer than any version of clean up the mess and move unrequired. Chai watched the time stomp. 11 seconds. For a man who made billion-dollar decisions in under 11 seconds was a very long time. He turned to his aide. Find out who she is. He straightened his cufflink. Everything by morning. You've been reassigned. Mia was standing at her locker when the kitchen supervisor said it. No preamble, no eye contact. The clipboard already moving on to the next item like the information was administrative, like it wasn't the beginning of something. To where? Executive floor kitchen, 42nd floor. The supervisor peeled a sticker off a sheet and applied it to a fresh pass card. Effective today. Someone put in a request. Who? Above my level. He handed her the card and walked away. Bomi appeared the moment he was out of earshot, materializing like a person who had been waiting in the wall. Did he just say 42nd floor? Yes. That's his floor. I know. That's the floor where there are 3 people allowed in the kitchen, and 2 of them have background checks from 3 different countries. And the third one is a man named Chef Yoon, who has never in 15 years said a single word that wasn't about food. Bomi. She stopped. Mia looked at the card in her hand. KH Holdings. Executive Access. Her name. Her photo somehow already printed on it, which meant this had been arranged before today. Before this morning. Before she'd broken the pot and said the wrong thing to the right person. Or the right thing to the wrong person. She wasn't sure yet which one it was. The 42nd floor kitchen was the size of her entire previous apartment, which Mia tried not to think about because the comparison made her feel things she didn't have time to feel. Chef Yoon acknowledged her arrival with a single nod. He was already working. He did not explain anything. He pointed at a station and turned back to his board. And Mia understood that this was a man who communicated through assignment. She put on her apron and started. At 11:40, a request came through the internal system. Not from Jin-ho directly, from an extension number she didn't recognize. Later, she would learn it was his assistant's assistant. 2 degrees of removal, a buffer so deliberate it felt almost shy, the request said. The braised short rib with a reduced stock. Not from the standard menu, the variation from yesterday. Yesterday, which meant someone had tasted what she'd made from the broken pot soup, the reserve she'd managed to save before cleanup, and filed it. Remembered it, wanted it again. She looked at Chef Yoon. He was already looking at her station. Yours, he said. That was all. She made the dish. She plated it. She watched it leave with the server and then stood at her station for a long moment with her hands at her sides, not sure what she was feeling. Not pride, exactly. Something quieter. Something that felt like being seen, except she hadn't been seen. She'd been tasted, twice removed, through a request filed by an extension number that didn't even have his name on it. It was the strangest thing. It was also the most careful thing anyone had done for her in a very long time. She didn't see him that day. She saw his shape once through the glass partition that separated the kitchen from the executive corridor. A tall figure moving with that same deliberate certainty, briefing someone without slowing down. He didn't look toward the kitchen, or he looked and she missed it. Bomi called it 6:15. So, how was it? What's it like up there? Does he just float around? Is the lighting different? Do they have better coffee machines? The coffee machines are the same. That can't be true. They have a better grinder. Bomi made a sound of deep personal offense. Unbelievable. What else? It's quiet. Mia wiped down her station. Very quiet. Is he there? Did you see him? I saw him through the glass. And Mia thought about the request. The extension number, the 2 degrees of removal, the fact that someone had specifically asked for the variation, the imperfect one, the one she'd made from salvage? No, she said, nothing in the building's lower administrative offices. A man named Secretary Go, who worked for Director Chai and filed a kind of paperwork that didn't officially exist, met with a woman named Ri, who had been transferred to the 42nd floor kitchen 6 months ago and had been very thorough in her loyalty ever since. "She's good," Ri said. "Fast, quiet, doesn't ask questions. Does he notice her?" A pause. He had her dish sent up. Secretary Gu wrote something down. "Watch her," he said. "Not just the food. The interactions? If he talks to her directly even once, I want to know the word count." Mia was the last one out of the kitchen. She was turning off the lights at the station when she noticed it. A small piece of paper, folded once, sitting on the edge of a prep counter. She didn't touch it immediately. She looked at it the way you look at something that might change the nature of the day you thought you'd had. Then she unfolded it. Less salt. 2 words. No signature. The handwriting was precise. Controlled, the letters narrow and sure. The kind of writing that belonged to someone who edited everything before they committed it to paper. She looked up. The corridor beyond the glass was empty. The fluorescent lights of the executive hall stretched away in both directions, silent and uninhabited. Whoever had left this had been here. In this kitchen, at her station, she folded the note and put it in her pocket. She turned off the last light and stood for a moment in the dark kitchen, 42 floors above the city, holding a folded piece of paper that smelled faintly of sandalwood and cold air. Her heart was doing something she wasn't going to name. Not yet. The headline appeared on Tuesday. KH Holdings, CEO Kang Jin-ho, distracted, erratic, or something else. Below it, 2 paragraphs of careful insinuation. Nothing provable, everything damaging. A source described unusual behavior in recent weeks. An unnamed board member noted concerns about judgment. And then, buried in the 3rd paragraph, like an afterthought designed to be found, the CEO has been spending uncharacteristic time near staff areas of the executive floor. Mia read it on her phone in the elevator on the way up. She read it twice. Staff areas. She was staff. She put her phone in her pocket and looked at the elevator doors and told herself this had nothing to do with her. That was the logical conclusion. The rationale one. The one that made sense for a woman who had been at this company for 9 days and exchanged approximately 40 words with its CEO, 2 of which were less salt. She told herself this for 6 floors. By the 42nd, she didn't quite believe it anymore. The kitchen was already tense when she arrived. Chef Yun said nothing about the article. Chef Yun said nothing about anything, which was consistent with his entire operating philosophy. But today, the silence felt weighted, like it was carrying something. The Mo. Though Mia didn't know she was a Mo, yet Ri Haiyenia was watching. Mia put on her apron. At 9:50, Jin-ho's assistant appeared in the kitchen doorway. Not the secondary extension. The actual assistant, a young man named Park, who moved like someone who had trained himself to be unobtrusive and had very nearly succeeded. "There's a board meeting at 11, Park said to Chef Yun. "The CEO will not require lunch service today." Chef Yun nodded. Park turned to leave. He stopped. He turned back specifically toward Mia's station. He also said. Park paused, like he was reading from something internal. "The short rib was overworked last Thursday. If the kitchen staff is making adjustments to the braise time, Riverti left." Bomi would have made a comment, but Bomi was 2 floors below and the kitchen was silent. And Mia stood at her station with the knowledge that she had been specifically addressed through a proxy, through a correction, through a critique, and that this was, in its strange and indirect way, more personal communication than she had received from this man in 9 days. She was not going to examine that. The board meeting was at 11. By 1, the results had filtered down through the building, the way bad news always does, faster than good news, quieter than it should be. Director Chai had presented what he called a performance concern portfolio. Documented instances, time-stamped photographs of the executive floor corridor, including, Mia heard from a server who overheard a conversation, images of the kitchen. Her kitchen. "He's using you," Bomi said on the phone at lunch, speaking quickly like she was afraid of being overheard. "Not you specifically. But the fact of you, he's telling the board that Jin-ho is distracted, that his judgment is compromised, that spending time near kitchen staff, he hasn't spent time near me. A note? Once? Through a proxy. He gave me a critique through his assistant. Mia, men like Kang Jin-ho do not give kitchen critiques. They have people for that. The fact that he's adjacent to it is apparently enough. She sat with that? Adjacent. She was an adjacency in someone else's war. She was the evidence in a case she hadn't agreed to be in. She didn't like that. At 2:15, Mia was in the executive corridor, legitimately. She was delivering to a conference room when she heard the voices through the open door of a smaller meeting room. Director Chai's voice. Smooth, practiced. And then the kitchen staff had nothing to do with any operational decision in this company. That's not the claim. Then say the claim clearly. A pause. The claim, Chai said, is that you're exhibiting behavior inconsistent with the profile of someone who should be running a company of this size. The kitchen is one data point. I gave a cooking critique. You wrote a note. Silence. I write notes to every department when standards drop. Jin-ho's voice was even. Check my records. You'll find 47 in the last quarter alone. 47 to departments, one to a specific staff member who has been at this company for 9 days. Mia, standing in the corridor, stopped breathing. She was using too much salt, Jin-ho said. It was so flat, so final, so devoid of anything that could be used as ammunition. And yet Mia, who had been holding a delivery tray at the exact angle of someone trying to become invisible, heard in the blankness of it something she couldn't name. He had defended himself, which meant defending the note, which meant he had not walked it back. He didn't have to do that. He did it anyway. The meeting ended. She moved before the door opened, 3 steps into the adjacent corridor, facing away. She heard him walk out, heard the footsteps, those same certain ones. They slowed. She felt it before she heard it. The shift in air pressure of a large, deliberate person stopping behind you. The delivery for Conference C is the 3rd door. She turned. He was looking at her tray, then at her face, briefly. Yes, sir. She kept her voice neutral. Thank you. He walked past her without another word. But in the 3 seconds before he walked away, she watched his jaw tighten once and release, and she understood, not fully, not yet, that she had heard something she wasn't supposed to hear, and that he knew it, and that he had chosen to say nothing about it. That evening, his assistant called in a request, not a food order. The CEO wants a background file on the temp kitchen staff, specifically the one assigned to the executive floor. Standard employment records. On the other end of the line, Jin-ho's longtime secretary, a woman named Oganga, who had worked for the Kang family for 19 years, heard the request. She wrote it down. She did not process it immediately, because Oganga knew a name she had heard before, and she knew that the last time that name had been in a KH Holdings file, the result had not been standard. She sat with that knowledge for a very long time. She said nothing. There were 3 notes by the end of the 2nd week. Less salt. The first one, then. The stock reduction, don't rush the last 15 minutes. You can taste the difference. Then, the plating on Thursday was better. Keep that. All the same handwriting. All unsigned. All left on the edge of her station, sometime between the end of service and whenever he walked the executive floor at night, which apparently he did. Which apparently no one had ever mentioned because it was simply a thing Kang Jin-ho did, and the staff of 39 years collectively pretended not to notice. Mia kept all 3 in the pocket of her apron. She told herself it was because she might need to reference them. She was aware this was not the real reason. On Thursday of the 2nd week, she decided to find out. It wasn't confrontation. Exactly. It was. She needed to know if this was an official performance review system she should be responding to, or something else. Because if it was something else, she needed to understand what it was before she let it mean anything. That was the logical explanation. She went over it twice. On the elevator, she found him at 6:40 in the evening, in the corridor outside the executive kitchen, reading something on his phone, which meant he was alone, which was unusual. And she had 3 seconds to decide if she was going to do this. She did. "Excuse me." She stopped in front of him. "Sir?" He looked up. His expression did what it always did. Closed, assessed, waited. "The notes?" A pause. "Not long. Just long enough to be deliberate." "What note?" And there it was. Flat. Final. Completely certain. He said it the way a man says something he intends to be a door. Closing. She looked at him. "The ones on my station." The handwriting is the same as the sign-off you use on executive memos. "I saw one on the conference room table last Tuesday." He said nothing. "I just want to know if this is official feedback. I should be logging somewhere." "No." "Then it's unofficial." "It's a preference." "Whose preference?" He looked at her for a moment that lasted longer than the question required. "Whoever is eating the food," he said. "That's you." He returned to his phone. "Good night." She stood there for 1 full second, understanding that she was being dismissed and that he was doing it badly. That a man truly unbothered would not have looked at her the way he just looked at her for that extra beat, would not have chosen the phrasing "whoever is eating the food" when the simplest answer was mine. "The stock reduction one," she said. "You're right. I was rushing it." He stopped scrolling. "I do that with anything that needs patience," she said. "My mother used to say I cooked the way I worried too fast. Not enough time to let things develop." She had no idea why she said that. He turned his phone face down against his palm. A small gesture, but deliberate, like a person setting something aside to pay attention. "The food is better when you slow down," he said. Not kindly. Just factually. Like a man stating physics. "Yes," she said. "Most things are." She left before he could respond. She took the stairs because the elevator felt too small for whatever her heartbeat was doing. She did not expect what happened the next morning. She was outside the building early, before her shift, sitting on the steps of the delivery entrance because Bomi's bus was late and she'd promised to wait when a car pulled up. Not Jin-ho's car, a different one. Darker. The kind that arrived quietly. Director Chai stepped out with the unhurried ease of a man who arranges his own arrival times. He looked at her like he'd been expecting her to be exactly there. Monsieur. Asma. The practiced kind. The kind that sits on the surface and doesn't go to the eyes. "I'm glad we can talk before the day starts." She stood, said nothing. "I'll be brief." He clasped his hands. "You seem like an intelligent young woman. A pragmatic one." He reached into his jacket. An envelope. "Set it on the railing beside her without touching her." "I understand you're a temp worker. The income must be irregular. This would stabilize things for several months." She looked at the envelope. "In exchange," he continued, "you simply reduce your presence. Request a transfer back to the lower floors. It's not a complicated thing. You want me to leave the 42nd floor? I want you to make a practical decision. Because I'm a distraction." His smile held its shape. "Because some distractions are more expensive than they look." She looked at the envelope for 3 more seconds. Then she picked it up, held it out. He didn't take it. "I'm not a distraction," she said. "I'm a cook. If someone wants me moved, they can say so through the kitchen supervisor." She set the envelope on top of his car. "Have a good morning, sir." She went inside. She did not look back, which was good, because if she had, she would have seen Chai pick up the envelope with a stillness that was not defeat, but recalculation. The expression of a man who has just learned something useful about an opponent he had not previously considered an opponent. She would also have seen, on the 42nd floor, a figure at the window. Jin-ho had come in early. He had seen the car arrive. He had seen the envelope. He had seen her hand it back. He stood at the window for a long time after she went inside, and did not do the work he had come in early to do, and did not examine why his chest had done that thing again. That sound like something unlocking that he didn't have the language for yet. That evening, His assistant received a different kind of request. Not a food note. A security review of all vehicles permitted to park at the building's delivery entrance. On the secondary note, filed separately, that read, ensure that temp kitchen staff on the 42nd floor has full employment benefits and priority contract renewal, effective immediately. It wasn't kindness. That was what he told himself. It was operational. He signed it and returned to his brief. Then, at 9:15, when the building was mostly empty, Director Chai made a call from his car. Move to phase 2, he said. Tonight. It was in the system before she arrived. That was the part that would stay with her, that while she was sleeping, while she was on the bus, while she was drinking her coffee at the delivery entrance steps and thinking about the reduced stock and whether she should try the longer braise at 40 minutes instead of 35, a file with her name on it was being read by 3 people in a boardroom on the 28th floor. She didn't know any of that when she swiped her card at 6:50 and rode the elevator to 4. She knew it at 7:12 when 2 men from building security appeared in the kitchen doorway. CEO Mia, she turned, we need you to come with us. The kitchen went still. Chef Yoon set down his knife. Ria Hai and I watched from the corner without moving, and if Mia had known to look for stillness in the wrong place, she might have noticed, but she didn't. Not yet. Why? HR protocol. There's a flag on your employment file. Please come with us. The security office was on the 7th floor, clean, institutional, the kind of room designed to make you feel like you've already been found guilty of something. They gave her a printed form. She read it. She read it again. Criminal record fraud. 2019. Employment application discrepancy. Previous termination for cause. She looked at the security officer across the table. None of this is true. We have documentation. Then your documentation is wrong. She kept her voice level. She had learned this from her mother, that when the world tries to make you loud, the most devastating response is to stay very quiet. I have never been charged with anything. I have never been terminated for cause. I don't know what this file is or where it came from, but none of it is mine. Mrs. CEO, I'd like to call HR directly. Mrs. CEO, this was submitted through official. I'd like to call HR directly. Please. The officer looked at her for a moment. Then, at his colleague. Something passed between them. The slight discomfort of 2 men who are following instructions. They were given very confidently and are now encountering a person who will not perform guilt for them. You'll need to remain here while we verify. Fine. She sat. She had nothing to do with her hands, so she folded them on the table and she breathed, and she did not allow herself to feel afraid because the fear was there. It was absolutely there, cold and specific, and aware that a fraudulent file in a building like this could end things faster than any amount of quiet dignity, but she locked it in a small room at the back of her chest, and she kept her hands still. 20 minutes later, she heard footsteps outside the door. One set. Sir, unhurried. The door opened. Jin-ho walked in, assessed the room in approximately 2 seconds, and looked at her across the table like he was reading a situation report. Sir, the security officer said, and stood, which told her everything about the hierarchy in this room. Leave us. They left. Jin-ho looked at the printed form on the table. He picked it up. He read it with the same expression he probably used to read quarterly earnings, complete, neutral processing. Nothing visible on the surface. He set it down. This file was submitted through the board's administrative channel, he said, at 11:40 last night. I know it's not real. I know. He said it simply. Not angrily. Not even with emphasis. Just, I know, like he had already concluded this before walking in. You'll be released in the next 10 minutes. The file will be flagged as disputed. Thank you. He looked at her. The silence went to beats longer than administrative. Did you give anyone access to your employee ID in the last week? No. Did anyone ask you for documentation? References? Copies of identification. She thought about Rihanya asking to verify her food hygiene certificate the previous week. She had thought nothing of it at the time. It was a normal request. She told him. His expression didn't change. But something behind his eyes did. "Go back to the kitchen," he said. "Don't discuss this with the other staff. Are you going to tell me what's happening?" He picked up the form again, briefly. Set it back down. "Not yet." She stood. She was at the door when he said it. Not loudly, not as if it cost him anything. "The braised dish. For lunch service, use 40 minutes. She stopped. She didn't turn around. "Yes, sir." What she didn't see, what happened 17 floors above her while she was walking back to the kitchen, while she was tying her apron and telling Bomi there had been a records error without further explanation, was the board meeting. Chai Soon-won stood at the head of the table. The file was projected on the screen. Her face, her name, the fraudulent record laid out with the confidence of a man who has arranged for the thing he is presenting to look inevitable. The CEO has granted executive floor access to an individual with a falsified background. Chai's voice was steady, practiced, the voice of a man who has rehearsed concern. This is not about the individual. It is about the question it raises regarding judgment, regarding standards, regarding whether the person currently leading this company is equipped to the file is disputed, said one board member. A woman named Director Lim, who had been on the board for 12 years and had a face like a person who could smell the difference between a process and a performance. Disputed by whom? By the CEO, who signed a flag on it 40 minutes ago. Chai did not blink, which supports my point. He is actively interfering in HR protocol for a kitchen employee. He disputed a fraudulent record in a building he runs. Silence. Chai moved on. The vote was called 4-3, a single vote margin. Formal inquiry. Approved. He straightened his jacket. He did not let himself smile until the boardroom was clear. Mia was plating the 40-minute braise when Bomi came to find her at lunch. Bomi had her phone on the screen, a news notification. KH Holdings Board launches formal inquiry into CEO Kang Jin-ho's leadership. Mia read it. Read it again. She looked up at the kitchen ceiling. The exhaust fans cycled overhead. Somewhere in this building, a war had been going on since before she arrived, and she had walked into it without anyone telling her it was there. And now her name was attached to a fraudulent file in a board inquiry against a man who had written her 3 cooking notes and signed her emergency benefits contract and walked into a security room to tell 2 officers to leave before she'd been there 20 minutes. Mia Bomi said carefully, "What's going on?" She looked at the plated dish. "The braise is better at 40, she said. She put it on the pass. On the 28th floor, Chai sat in his office and looked out at the city with the ease of a man who has just moved his most important piece across the board. The inquiry would take weeks. The media coverage had already started. He had 3 journalists on retainer who knew which questions to ask and which sources to amplify. All he needed now was for the girl to stay in frame. Every time she stayed, the story got better. He picked up his phone. "The board voted," he said. 4-3. Begin the media cycle. A pause on the other end, and the girl. Chai looked at his window. The skyline, the building that had his name on 3 floors, and would soon, if this went correctly, have it on the letterhead. "Leave her," he said. "She's doing everything right." He hung up. He almost missed what came after the secondary notification on his secondary phone, the one his assistant managed. A flag from the building's legal team. Board inquiry complaint, filed by CEO, challenging procedural standing of 4-3 vote. Chai picked up the phone. Read it, he set it down. He was no longer smiling. It was gone on a Friday morning. Her locker, 3rd from the left, bottom row, the one she'd been assigned her first day, and had customized only slightly. An index card with her name in her handwriting taped to the inside of the door. A spare set of kitchen gloves and her mother's recipe book. The gloves were still there. The recipe book was not. She stood with the locker door open for a long moment, not moving. The way you stand when you're sure you must be misremembering, when you're certain the thing is simply somewhere else, somewhere logical, somewhere that will become obvious if you stand still long enough. It didn't become obvious. She turned to Chef Yoon. Did anyone access the staff lockers last night? He looked up from his cutting board. He was quiet for a moment. Building security, he said. Late. After midnight. They said it was part of the inquiry documentation sweep. They took personal items. He didn't answer, which was its own answer. She went to HR. The woman at the desk was apologetic in the precise way of a person who is apologetic about the procedure, not the outcome. As part of the formal inquiry, any items present on company premises that may constitute relevant documentation. It's a recipe book. If it contains written materials, that it's my mother's recipe book. She died 4 years ago. It has recipes in it. Mia set her hands flat on the desk to keep them still. It has her handwriting in it. It is not documentation. Miss CEO, I understand this is where is it? It's been logged as part of the inquiry evidence file. It can be retrieved after the inquiry concludes, which should be weeks. Potentially? Yes. Mia looked at the HR officer for a long time. Thank you, she said, which was not what she felt, but it was what she said, because there was no version of what she felt that she was going to show this person. She walked out. Bomi found her in the stairwell at 11, sitting on the 7th floor landing with her back against the wall and her hands in her lap. Not crying. Not anywhere close to crying. The expression of someone who has gone somewhere quiet and internal and is waiting for the noise to pass. Bomi sat down next to her, without speaking. After a while, Mia said, "The recipe book was the last thing I have in her handwriting." Bomi didn't try to fix it. She just stayed there, which was exactly right. The tabloid went live at 12. Bomi saw it first. She brought her phone to the kitchen with the expression of someone delivering very bad news to someone who already knows the day has been bad and is about to find out it is worse. Exclusive. The kitchen temp. At the center of the KH Holdings crisis. Mia's face. Her name. A photograph taken from somewhere inside the building. The corridor. Blurred. But clearly her. The fraudulent criminal record. Reprinted in full. The implication. Never stated directly. Merely arranged in proximity. A woman with a documented history and a curious degree of access to the company's CEO. Mia read it on Bomi's phone. She handed it back. She took off her apron. She folded it neatly and set it on the prep counter. Mia, I'll submit my resignation through the proper channel. She was already moving toward the locker room. Tell Chef Yun, I'm sorry about the short notice. You can't just Bomi. She stopped. She turned back. My face is in a tabloid. My name is in a board inquiry. Someone went into my locker and took a dead woman's recipe book as evidence in a corporate war. I have nothing to do with. She said it evenly. I am going to go home. She had her bag. She had her coat. She was at the elevator. The doors opened. Jin-ho was inside. They looked at each other for 1 second. She stepped in. The doors closed. The elevator descended in silence. 3 floors. 4. Don't go. She looked at the floor. Counter. 3837. Mr. Kang, don't. He said it again. Not a command this time. Something else. Something that came from a different part of a man who didn't usually speak from that part. Don't go. She looked at him. He was facing forward. Jaw set. The slight tension in his shoulders that she had learned to read over 3 weeks as the external sign of internal effort. Why? She said. It was a real question. Not rhetorical, not sarcastic. She genuinely wanted to know, because she had been in this building for 3 weeks, and in that time she had been reassigned without explanation and written notes without signature, and had her records forged, and her mother's book taken, and her face put in a tabloid, and she needed someone to give her a reason that made sense. He didn't answer. The elevator reached 35. 34. He still didn't answer. And because he couldn't give her a reason, that made sense. Because the truth was that the reason lived in a part of him that had been sealed for 30 years, and he didn't have the vocabulary for it yet. Hadn't unpacked the language that would let him say, because When he handed back Chai's envelope without flinching, I felt something move. Hadn't admitted even to himself that the notes were not about the food because of all of that. She walked past him when the elevator opened. She didn't look back. He stood in the elevator, and the doors closed again, and he was alone in the small ascending box. And for the first time in 30 years, Kang Jin-ho had no idea what to do next. The tabloid went to 300,000 shares by 2 in the afternoon. Chai saw the numbers and was satisfied. What he didn't see, because he was satisfied. And satisfaction makes people stop looking, was Jin-ho's secretary of 19 years, sitting at her desk at 4:15 with a file she had been sitting with for 3 days. The file had a name at the top. See, Original Land and Property Transfer, KH Holdings, 2009. She had been holding it because she was afraid, because she knew what it contained and she knew what it meant, and she knew that once she handed it to either of the two people who needed to see it, nothing would be able to go back. She also knew that she had held it 3 days too long, because today the person who needed it most had walked out of the building. Oh! Jinga picked up her phone. She did not call. She called Bomi. "Can you get me SIO Mia's number?" she said. Without telling anyone, I asked. At 6:20, Mia was in her apartment. Coat is too, on bag on the floor. By the door. She hadn't moved past the entryway because moving further into the apartment felt like accepting the day, and she wasn't ready to accept the day. Her phone rang. Number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer. "Miss CEO?" A woman's voice. "Careful!" The voice of someone who has chosen to say something after a long time of choosing not to. "My name is Ojenga. I work for Mr. Kong." A pause. "I have something that belongs to your family. Something that was taken from your father a long time ago." I should have said something sooner. I'm another pause. "I'm sorry I didn't." Mia sat down on the entryway floor. "Tell me," she said. The file was 22 pages. Ojenga brought it to Mia's apartment at 7 in the evening. She sat across from her at the small kitchen table with the careful posture of a woman who has spent a long time knowing something and who now has to watch the person in front of her know it too. Mia read slowly. The first 10 pages were standard documentation, property transfer agreements, zoning filings, restaurant licensing, paperwork. The language was dense and administrative, and she worked through it with the patience she put into a 40-minute braise, not skipping, not rushing. Then page 11, SEO Kang Jin-ho, Agreement of Voluntary Asset Transfer minus 2009. She read it. She turned to page 12, which was the original contract. Her father's signature at the bottom, the ink unsteady in the way of a person signing under conditions not clearly documented. Below his signature, in the notary section, a date, and next to the date, initialed a countersignature. She looked at the countersignature for a long time. CSEW Chai said. She turned to O. Jinga. "He was the one who handled my father's contract." "Yes. My father didn't sell the restaurant voluntarily." O. Jinga's hands were folded on the table. "The contract is filed with the city, shows a voluntary transfer at market value." She paused. "The contract as originally signed, the version your father kept, shows different terms. A coerced transfer. The market value payment was structured as a loan with conditions that triggered full forfeiture within 90 days. She looked at her hands. "Your father didn't have a lawyer who caught it." Mia looked back at the page. "Where did you get this?" "The original contract." "Your father's copy." A pause. "It was in your recipe book." She stopped. "The recipe book that was taken." "Yeah." "Oh." Ganga's voice was careful, but before it was logged into evidence, I requested to photograph all items being seized. Standard documentation. She reached into the file folder and placed a set of photographs on the table. Every page of the book. Her mother's handwriting in the margins. The recipes, the notes, the dates, and they're tucked between the back cover and the last recipe. Photographed in full. A folded piece of paper. 2 pages. Densely printed. Her father's original contract. Mia looked at the photographs for a long time. Her mother had kept it. In the book, between the last recipe and the cover, folded small, like something you put somewhere safe that is also somewhere personal, because you trust the personnel to outlast the official. Her mother had known, had kept the evidence, had put it in the one place she trusted most. The book that her hands touched every day. The book that would go where Mia went. The book that would survive. She had given it to Mia without telling her what it was. Maybe she hadn't known the right time to explain. Maybe she had meant to and run out of time. Maybe she thought Mia wasn't ready. Or maybe she simply trusted that her daughter would find it eventually. "This proves fraud," Mia said. "Yes, against Chai Sung-won, and against several others who facilitated the transfer. But Chai was the architect." Ujinga looked at her directly. "He has been maneuvering to control KH Holdings for years. Mr. Kang's father, Jin-ho's father, built this company. When he died, Chai began positioning himself. The inquiry against Jin-ho is not really about judgment. It's about removal. And my father's restaurant was the first test case." She exhaled. "Chai used KH Holdings to acquire properties through coerced transfers in 2008 and 2009. Your father's was one of 6. He structured it so the company appeared to be the beneficiary. But the contracts, the original contracts, were brokered through his private administrative office. The liability is his. Personally." Mia sat back. She was not surprised. Exactly. The shape of it had been forming for weeks, in the way a thing you know but can't yet see slowly assembles itself out of the available information. She had felt the outline of it in the fraudulent file, in the tabloid photograph, in the way Chai had shown up at the delivery entrance with an envelope and a practiced smile. He had needed her gone because she was close, not to Jin-ho, not primarily, though that was how he'd framed it to the board. Close to the building, close to the records, close to a man who might, if he wanted to look into the 2009 transfers. "Mr. Kang doesn't know," Mia said. "He knows something happened with the 2009 acquisitions. He has not had the original documentation." "Oh!" Genga looked at her steadily. "He asked me for your employment file 3 days ago. When I saw your name, SEO, I should have come to you immediately. I didn't. I'm sorry." Mia looked at the photographs on the table, her mother's handwriting, page after page after page. Less salt, she thought, without knowing why. Most things are better when you slow down. She picked up her phone. She had Jin-ho's number. It had been added to her contact file when she was given executive floor access, a standard protocol she had never used. She dialed. He picked up on the first ring. Not his assistant, Tim, which meant he'd been waiting for something, or someone, or she didn't finish the thought. "I have the contract," she said. "My father's original contract, with Chai Sung-won's counter-signature. It proves fraud." She kept her voice steady. "It's photographed. I have copies." A long silence. Not the silence of a man processing. The silence of a man who has been holding a door shut for a long time and has just felt it start to open from the other side. "Where are you?" he said. His voice had changed. Not softer. Exactly. More present. Like the full weight of him had shifted into the words. She gave him her address. She looked at the photographs on the table, at her mother's handwriting, at the last recipe, doenjang jigai, the way your grandmother made it, and below it, tucked into the crease, the folded paper that had crossed 17 years and 1 broken pot and 3 notes about salt to arrive in front of her on a kitchen table at 7:15 on a Thursday night. "He'll try to get it back," she said. "I know." A pause. "Don't open the door to anyone until I'm there." She said yes. She set the phone down, and for the first time since the tabloid had gone live, since the locker had been empty, since the elevator had opened and she had walked past him, since the entire accumulated weight of the last 3 weeks had pressed itself against her chest for the first time, something in her exhaled. Chai's men arrived first. 2 of them. She heard them in the hallway before they knocked the sound of people moving, with the particular certainty of people who do not expect the door to remain closed. She did not open it. She sat at her kitchen table with the photographs in front of her and her phone in her hand, and she waited. They knocked. She didn't move. Mrs. CEO, we're from the KH Holdings legal department. We need to recover board inquiry documentation that was removed from company premises. The photographs were already emailed. 3 recipients. Oh Jin-ga, a corporate fraud attorney. Oh Jin-ga had called 40 minutes ago, and one address she had gotten from Oh Gen-ga that she would understand the significance of later, the General Counsel of the Financial Services Commission. She had sent them while she was on the phone with Jin-ho. She had not told him she was going to do that. She had just done it because her mother had raised a woman who did not wait for permission to take care of herself. The man in the hallway knocked again. She heard the elevator. Then footsteps, one set certain. A voice, low, not loud, that did not require volume. Move away from that door. He was alone. No security. No assistant. He had driven here himself, which was a thing she would learn later he hadn't done in 4 years. The 2 men in the hallway took one look at him and stepped back with the involuntary compliance of people whose entire operational framework had just been contradicted by a single presence. He knocked once. Her door. She opened it. He looked at her the way he had looked at her in the security office. The same complete assessment. The same absence of performance, except this time he looked for slightly longer, as if checking that she was intact. Are you all right? Yes. He stepped inside. She closed the door. He looked at the photographs on the table, at Oganga's file, at the careful arrangement of it all, the evidence laid out in sequence, organized, referenced. You photographed everything before they logged it, he said. Standard documentation, she said. Oganga's words. Something crossed his face that might, on a different man, have been called a smile. It came and went too quickly to be sure. He picked up the photograph of the original contract. He read it. She watched his face while he read the controlled neutral processing, and then, near the bottom of the page, near the counter signature, she watched something change. Not surprised. He had suspected Chai for a long time, but suspicion and evidence are different things, and the weight of the difference crossed his face in a way she didn't think he was aware of. He set the photo down. The FSC copy, he said. When did you send it? While I was on the phone with you. He looked at her. I didn't tell you to do that. I know. A beat. It was the right call, he said, and there was something in his voice when he said it, something between acknowledgement and relief that made her understand he had not said that particular sentence to very many people. The board meeting was called for 9 the following morning. Jin-ho called it himself, which he had the authority to do as acting CEO, regardless of the pending inquiry, a procedural nuance Chai had not anticipated. He filed the procedural challenge at 11:30 the previous night. By 6 in the morning, 3 board members, including Director Lim, had received the FSC notification and the photographed contract. Chai arrived at the boardroom at 8:55, looking composed. He stopped being composed approximately 4 minutes into the meeting. Director Lim presented the photographs. She presented the FSC complaint. She presented the timeline minus 2008, 2009, the 6 coerced transfers, the administrative office that traced back to Chai's personal entity. The count. Chai looked at the screen. He looked at Jin. Jin-ho looked back at him with the complete, neutral expression of a man who has removed everything from his face that could be used. This is fabricated, Chai said. The FSC has the original photographs. The counter-signature has been verified against your notarized documents from 2009 by 2 independent analysts. Director Lim's voice was even. Fabricated is not an available position. Director Chai. Chai stood. The room was silent. And then, because a man who has spent 20 years arranging other people's collapses cannot accept the geometry of his own, he looked at the door where Mia was standing. Oh! Jin-ga had asked her to come, as a witness, as the person whose family had been the first documented case. She stood in the doorway in her kitchen uniform, which she had put on this morning because it was what she had and because she had not had time to go home for a change of clothes, and because some part of her felt, without fully articulating it, that arriving as exactly what she was, a cook, A temp worker, a woman whose father had lost everything in this building, was the most honest possible statement. Chai pointed at her. She doesn't belong in this room. His voice was still controlled, but the surface was cracking at the edges. She's a kitchen worker. She's the girl you've all been treating like evidence. Look at this. Look at what he's reduced this board to, Mr. Chai Jin-ho's voice. Chai stopped. Jin-ho stood. That woman's father built a restaurant for 19 years. You took it from him in 90 days through a contract he didn't fully understand, using a company he trusted through a process you designed to be invisible. His voice did not rise. It had no need to rise. Her presence in this room is more legitimate than yours. Silence. The inquiry against my leadership is suspended pending FSC investigation. Jin-ho looked at the board. The vote on Director Chai's removal can proceed immediately per the fraud clause in the founding charter. I'd like to call it. It was 5-2. Not close. The security team arrived to escort Chai at 11. He walked through the boardroom with the terrible stiffness of a man who still believes, even now, that he will find a way to reverse this. He passed Mia in the doorway. He stopped, very briefly. His voice was quiet, not composed. Something else, the compressed fury of someone who has lost and cannot absorb it. You had no idea what you walked into, he said. She looked at him. Neither did you, she said. He was escorted out. The boardroom settled. Voices, documentation, the administrative aftermath of a collapse. Director Lim was already on a call. Other members moved toward the door. Jin-ho stood at his end of the table. Mia stood at hers. The room was emptying around them. He looked at her across the length of the table. The overhead lights, the empty chairs. The photographs still on the screen behind him. Her father's name in the contract, 17 years, and 1 recipe book, and 3 notes about salt. He looked at her the way he had been looking at her in pieces for 3 weeks through glass, through proxies, through the angle of a door he'd told himself he wasn't stopping at. All at once, now, directly. He didn't look away. For the first time in 3 weeks, he didn't look away. He found her in the kitchen. Not his kitchen, hers. The 42nd floor, after the board had cleared, after Director Lim had thanked her with a handshake that meant something and asked if she was all right, and she had said yes, which was true, and also not fully true, and also the only thing she had the capacity to say in that particular moment. She had gone back to the kitchen because it was the only place she knew how to be. Chef Yoon had gone home. The kitchen was empty. She had changed into her clean apron because the one she'd worn to the boardroom had a small stain from the morning service. She'd grabbed it automatically, without thinking. The muscle memory of a person who defaults to work when she doesn't know what else to do with her hands. She was making the short rib. No reason. Nobody had ordered it. She just needed something with a long braise, something that required patience, that couldn't be rushed, that would be ruined if she tried to force it. She heard the footsteps. She didn't turn around. Chef Yoon went home, she said. I know. He was at the kitchen door. I'm not here for Chef Yoon. She kept her hands on the prep counter, giving the braising liquid another long stir, the way her mother used to slow, deliberate circles, watching how it moved. He came into the kitchen. He stopped at the pass, which was as far as anyone who was not kitchen staff was supposed to come, and she thought, in the small, observant part of her that never fully stopped noticing things, that he had stopped exactly there. At the line, "Oh, Jenga told me," he said. "About your father, about what she knew. She told me about you first." Mia kept her voice even. "She said your father built this company, that Chai has been trying to take it since the beginning. Yes, you knew something was wrong with the 2009 acquisitions. I knew the numbers didn't trace cleanly. I didn't have documentation." A pause. "I didn't know whose name was on the original contracts." She looked at the braising liquid. "If you had known it was my father, I would have found you sooner." She turned. He was standing at the pass with his jacket open, the same unreadable face, except that it wasn't quite unreadable anymore, Or maybe she had simply gotten better at reading it, had learned the specific language of his jaw and his eyes, and the particular quality of silence he used when something cost him effort. This was costing him effort. "There's something I want to say," he said. She waited. He looked at her the way he looked at the braising liquid, like a man who knows you can't force the process. "I've spent 30 years keeping everyone at exactly the right distance," he said. "It was functional. It was a system that worked. I was not interested in revising it." She said nothing, and then a woman broke a pot in my dining room and looked up at me like I was just a person. A pause, and told me she was going to pay for the floor damage. Something loosened in her chest that she hadn't known was tight. "You didn't tell me who you were?" she said. "No." "You watched me from the corridor?" "Yes." "You wrote notes on my station?" "Yes." "You signed my benefits?" "Contract?" "Yes." The faintest shift in his face. That was operational. "It wasn't." "No," he said, after a moment. "It wasn't." The braise was beginning to smell right, the slow particular way of something that has been given the time it needed. She turned the heat down without looking away from him. "I'm not." He stopped. Started again, the effort visible and, in its visibility, more honest than anything performed. "I have no experience with this. Any of this, the version of me that existed 3 weeks ago would not have recognized today. And the version of you now," he looked at it directly, the way he'd looked at her across the boardroom table, "is certain about exactly one thing." She waited. "I don't want you to leave," he said. "Not the building. Not the kitchen. Not." He stopped once more, and then, in the voice of a man who has spent 30 years not saying the things that mattered and is now, for the first time, choosing not to do that. "Not me." The kitchen was very quiet. The braise moved in slow circles. "That's the first honest thing you've said to my face," she said. "I know. The notes don't count. The notes absolutely count." She almost smiled. Almost. The corner of her mouth moved, which was enough. And he saw it. And something in his face changed. Not the almost smile she'd been cataloging for 3 weeks, but the actual thing, brief and unguarded and entirely real. And she understood in that moment that this was what 30 years of containment looked like when it finally let something through. It looked like a man who had just remembered what it felt like to be a person. Old Jinga appeared in the kitchen doorway, correctly timed, or perhaps just unable to help herself. "The FSC is filing formal charges," she said. "Chai's legal team called. He won't be contesting the board decision." She looked between the two of them with the expression of a woman who has known this man for 19 years and is watching something she had almost stopped expecting. "I also want to say she's straightened. I should have told you about the contract the day I found her name. I should have said something when I first saw the file. I'm sorry I didn't." Jin-ho looked at her. "You said something when it mattered," he said. "That counts." Oh Jinga nodded once. Too firmly, the way a person nods when they're making sure they don't show what they're feeling. She left. The kitchen was quiet again. Mia turned the braise down to its lowest setting. She wiped her hands on her apron. She reached into the shelf below the prep counter, where she kept her things, and she took out the 3 notes: less salt, the stock reduction, the plating, folded, and slightly worn from being in her apron pocket for 2 weeks. She put them on the pass between them. He looked at them. He reached into his jacket. He put down a 4th piece of paper she hadn't seen before. The same handwriting, the same narrow, controlled letters. She unfolded it. "The braise is better when you stop counting the minutes." She looked up. "When did you write that?" "Last week." He looked at the notes. "I didn't leave it." "Why not?" "A bit." "Because I didn't know what came after it." She looked at the note. She looked at him. She looked at the 4 pieces of paper between them, for small, careful, unsigned things that added up to a vocabulary he had built in the only language he'd been able to use. "The recipe book," she said. "When it's returned from evidence, it will be returned this week. I'll make sure of it." "There's a last page." She looked at the braise. "My mother left it blank. She used to say she was saving it." She paused. "I don't know what for." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, quietly, with the complete seriousness of a man who means exactly what he says. "Fill it with me." She looked at him. He did not look away. The last page of the recipe book was not blank anymore. It had taken 8 months to fill it, not because they couldn't think of what to write. It turned out that two people who had been quietly paying attention to each other for a very long time had quite a lot to say once they started, but because they had decided, without discussing it, to let things develop, the way a stock reduction needs its full time, or you can taste the shortcut. The recipe on the last page was Danjangji, her mother's version, annotated in Mia's handwriting, with a note at the bottom in different handwriting. Narrower, more controlled. That said, half the salt she used, she would have agreed. Trust the ferment. Jin-ho had never cooked anything in his life before the 3rd month. He remained, by any objective measure, not a gifted cook. He was precise and impatient with anything that required improvisation, which was most of cooking, and he had a tendency to overreduce things that she had teased him about on 4 separate occasions. He improved, slowly, in the way of a man who applies himself to things he has decided to matter. The FSC investigation concluded in 7 months. Chai Sung-won was formally charged with financial fraud, coerced asset transfer, and obstruction of regulatory process. The case covered 6 families, including the SEO family. Damages were assessed. A civil suit followed the criminal charge. He did not contest. The building's lobby had his name on 2 plaques. Both were removed during the 7th month. The process was quiet and administrative. Mia read about it in a company notice that circulated on a Tuesday and did not attach much feeling to it, because the satisfaction of it had happened earlier in the boardroom, when he had pointed at her doorway and called her a kitchen worker, and Jin-ho had stood up. That was when it had finished. Everything after was paperwork. The kitchen on the 42nd floor acquired a second regular occupant in the 5th month. Not, I say. Ooh. He came before service, when the kitchen was being prepped, and he sat at the counter on the wrong side of the pass, something Chef Yoon had. Technically prohibited and actually tolerated without comment, and he read briefing documents and occasionally made observations about the prep work that were usually correct and sometimes offered without being asked, which she had opinions about. She told him her opinions. He adjusted. Slowly. The way things adjust when they've been a certain shape for a long time and are becoming a different one. Chef Yoon, who had worked in professional kitchens for 31 years and had seen many things, said nothing about any of it. He simply began setting 2 coffees at the beginning of service. On the 1-year anniversary of the broken pot, he gave her a gift. The original ceramic pot, not the same one that one was gone, shattered on the dining room floor. A new one, made by the same family workshop, in the same region, the same weight, the same dark glaze. He had spent 3 months locating it. She held it and did not say anything for a long time. He waited. That was new. He had learned to wait. "My mother would have thought you were terrifying," she said finally. "She would have been right, and then she would have fed you anyway." She looked at the pot. She always fed the people who looked like they needed it. He was quiet. "Did I look like I needed it?" She looked up at him. "The moment I saw you," she said, "standing in that doorway, watching me on the floor, you looked like a man who hadn't been warm in a very long time." He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair back from her face slowly, the way he did most things now, the way of someone who no longer treats touch as a transaction. "And now?" he asked. She thought about the last page. Phil, the 4 notes in the drawer, the 2 coffees at the start of service, the mornings that had accumulated into a life she had not planned and would not trade. "Now," she said, "you look like someone who forgot that warmth was something that could happen to him." He took the pot from her carefully, set it on the counter, kept her hands. "It surprised me," he said. "Every morning. It still surprises me." She smiled. The real one. The full one. The one that had stopped him in a dining room doorway on a Tuesday when everything was wrong. "Me too," she said. "That's the part I never expected." She leaned into him, in the kitchen that had been the beginning of everything, in the quiet that had once been cold and was now simply theirs. "I never expected to be happy," she said. "That's the part that still surprises me every single morning."